Well, the importance is that we know whether or not the people who are registered in our community are actually compliant with the conditions of their registry, whether or not they're on parole or probation, or there's some other condition. We're able to confirm that they are where they say they are, or that they're not where they say they are, and then we can take action from there. But the main thing is that we're able to determine who's in compliance and who's not.
And you guys made a bunch of checks, so like 94 different things, or right? Yeah, and just your result from your reaction to the result. What did you?
Well, we made 95 different checks on registers. Let me start again.
Sure.
We made 95 different checks on registered offenders in Silverville County. 11 violent offenders, and then 84 registered sexual offenders. The majority of the offenders were all in compliance. We also we arrested 2 different offenders of the sexual offenders for violating the conditions of their registration and or supervision. There was also 9 different arrests of individuals who were not registered, who were arrested as a result of contacts that our officers or agents involved in the operation had contact with them, and they were found to be either wanted or they had a new criminal offense that was observed by the people who were conducting the operation.
And when you do these checks, what is it? What kind of violation, I guess, were you looking for? What are they required to do if they're on?
Well, there's
registry?
various requirements. Some are simply required to register with their address when they're living here in our county. Some of those are on parole or probation, so they may have different requirements, whether they can have alcohol, they can have visitors of certain people, anything like that, where they're required to register with us. Some have additional compliance checks as far as what might be a violation or not. Others are just simply required to register, and their sentences may be expired.
What do you feel about the result again? How would you feel?
Well, I think the main thing is that most of the vast majority of offenders were compliant. They were where they were registered, and so it shows that our special deputy, who's in charge of keeping track of these offenders, is doing a nice job of keeping the files updated, and these offenders are compliant for the most part, and our files are up to date.
What's the point of having this kind of registry? Why is it?
Well, I think one thing, if there's no checks and there's no money following up on any of these registrations, then I think there's a certain element of people who are not going to be compliant simply because they don't think anybody's going to check on them. In this case, they realized that this time, obviously, we checked, and I would like to see this operation several times a year at different times so that we can ensure on a random basis that these people are in fact in compliance and living up to the requirements.
And where were the majority of where do most of the offenders live, city versus rural?
Well, the vast majority of these are within what I would consider the urban boundaries of Butte.
And then are they at all tier levels?
Yeah, there's probably, I don't have a breakdown of the tier levels as far as sexual offenders go, but I believe there's probably people in every one of those tiers.
Maybe you asked this already. Is this everybody on the list that you guys checked? Or?
Yeah, we checked on all 84 sexual offenders who were registered in our county, and we were able to locate all of them except 6, which we're working on to confirm. Did they move? Did they leave our county for some reason? Are they registered in another county? So that's something we'll be checking up with. And we didn't check on all the violent offenders, and that's a possibility in the future. We only checked on 11 violent offenders, and I don't have the total number off the top of my head as far as violent offenders registered here. But we focused mainly on registered sexual offenders.
And this is the first one that you've done for 2016, but can you talk about what you said you were saying you wish that it could happen more often?
Yeah, I'd like to see this become, I hate to say regular because it's going to be random and we don't want to be predictable when we run these checks, but I'd like to see this done 3 or 4 times a year. Logistically, it's difficult to coordinate getting all the people here from the different agencies, but I'd like to see that so the people who are registering in our community realize that we are going to check on them and make sure they're up to date with the terms of whatever sentence they were given.
Given Butte's population, are 84 registered sex offenders, is that considered a large group?
I don't know if I can answer that question. I'd have to look at the other communities and see how many registered sexual offenders they have. That does seem to be a fairly high amount of sexual offenders for a community of our size. And again, that's why it's important to conduct this type of operation, so that we are able to track these folks and make sure they're in compliance with their original sentence.
So some people who will be reading this story tomorrow, or listening to it on the news tonight, are gonna be very anxious about the number of offenders living in the county. Is there anything that you wanna say to the public?
Well, I don't think there's really any difference between this county and other counties. I mean, obviously, there are counties who have more registered offenders in their county, and there's obviously some with less. So I think the Department of Corrections works on that as far as keeping the population of registered offenders in line with what we would expect to see in a county of this size. So whether or not we're higher or lower than the average, I couldn't say, but obviously the main thing is that we're trying to make sure that the people who have made mistakes or committed crimes in the past are held responsible, and that they're living up to their sentence. And that's what's important for the people to realize as far as the citizens.
And people can check the registry, right? Isn't it public?
Yeah, the registered, the Violent Sexual Offender Registry is online, and you can check, not only does it have the number of people as well as their names, but it also has the location of their residences. So it appears from what we were able to accomplish last week that our registry is up to date, and we're doing a good job of keeping the file up to date. And so those online registries should be accurate as far as, at least for Butte Silver Bow, as far as the timing and registration of the offenders.